Have you ever felt like you're moving forward, doing all the right things, and suddenly everything stops? Doors close, opportunities disappear, people walk away, and you start asking, God, why is this happening? We don't like it when God blocks our path. It frustrates us. It confuses us. But what if I told you that God's blockage is often His direction? When God blocks your path, He's not punishing you. He's positioning you. He's not rejecting you. He's redirecting you. Many of us pray, God, show me your will. But when He closes a door, we cry and try to force it open. Listen to me. If God shuts a door, stop knocking on it. Stop trying to revive something He is trying to replace. You may not see it now, but what He is keeping you from is smaller than what He is preparing you for. There are moments in life when everything seems to be moving forward, and then suddenly, without warning, something stops you. The opportunity you were excited about vanishes. The relationship you thought was solid falls apart. The job you believed was your breakthrough slips away. And in that moment, confusion sets in. You start to question, why would God allow this? Why would He block something that seems so right? We've been taught that when things don't go our way, we must fight harder, push more, and keep pressing forward. But have you ever considered that maybe, just maybe, God is the one blocking you? What if He is the one standing in the way not to harm you, but to help you? You see, when God blocks your path, it's not because He's rejecting you. It's because He's directing you. His blockage is not punishment, it's positioning. God sees the end from the beginning. He knows what we do not know, and He understands what we cannot yet comprehend. Sometimes what looks like a great opportunity in our eyes is actually a trap. What feels like a loss is really a setup for something greater. But because we are so consumed by what we want, we don't recognize that God is saving us from something that could destroy us. Think about a child reaching for a pot of boiling water. The child sees it as something interesting, something desirable, something that seems harmless. But the parent sees the danger. So the parent blocks the child, pulls their hand away, and says, no. Now, to the child, that no feels like rejection. It feels unfair. It feels like the parent is keeping something good away. But the truth is, that blockage is love. That blockage is protection. That blockage is wisdom that the child doesn't yet understand. How many times in your life have you been reaching for something that looked good, but God said, how many times have you planned out your future only to have everything collapse? And in your frustration, you assume God was against you, when in reality, He was for you. The problem is not that God is blocking you. The problem is that you don't yet see what He sees. Look at the life of Joseph. He had a dream. He saw himself in a position of power. He believed he was destined for greatness. But what happened? He was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, wrongfully imprisoned. At every stage of his journey, it looked like God was blocking him. But in reality, every blockage was a redirection toward His purpose. If Joseph had stayed where he was, he would have never made it to the palace. If he had never been thrown into the pit, he would have never met the people who would position him for his destiny. What looked like rejection was actually divine direction. God will block you from things that will limit you. He will remove people who will hinder your growth. He will close doors that are too small for the vision He has for you. But here's the challenge. Will you trust Him when you don't understand? Will you believe that His ways are higher than your ways? Or will you keep pushing against what He has already decided to move you away from? Some of us are still crying over doors God closed years ago. We're still chasing relationships He already ended. We're still trying to revive things that He has removed. But if God blocked it, why are you still trying to hold on to it? If He said, this is not for you, why are you still looking back? God does not block to hurt. He blocks to heal. He blocks to redirect. He blocks to preserve your purpose. When something is taken away, when a door closes, when a path is blocked, the right response is not to complain. It's to ask, God, what are you protecting me from? What are you preparing me for? Maybe that business deal didn't go through because God saw something you didn't. Maybe that friendship ended because he knew they would betray you later. Maybe that job interview was unsuccessful because he has a higher position waiting for you. He's asked the way, the inner part of you, the way you think, the way you are being. He went through that because and soon what you see as rejection is often God's hand pulling you towards something greater. He is not trying to destroy your dreams. He's trying to align them with his vision. And if you trust him, if you surrender to his direction, you will look back and realize that every blocked path was a step towards something better. So the next time you feel stuck, the next time a door closes in your face, don't be discouraged. Don't try to force what God has already removed. Instead, lift your hands and say, Lord, I trust you. If you blocked it, I believe you have something greater, because he always does. There are moments in life when we stand before a door, convinced that it is the right one, only to watch it close in front of us. The opportunity we prayed for slips away. The relationship we invested in falls apart. The career path we worked so hard to build suddenly disappears. And in that moment, frustration sets in, confusion takes over. We begin to ask God, why? Why would you close a door that seems so perfect? What we often fail to realize is that a closed door is not the end of God's plan. It is the beginning of his redirection. We cry over what was taken, but God is preparing something greater. We hold on to what is familiar, but he is leading us into something bigger. The problem is, we trust what we see more than the one who sees all. We assume that because the door looked good to us, it must have been God's best. But listen to me. Not every open door is a divine door, and not every closed door is a loss. Sometimes the greatest blessing God can give you is an unanswered prayer. What you thought was a dream job could have turned into a nightmare. That relationship you were holding on to could have delayed your purpose. That business deal you were desperate for could have drained you instead of prospering you. And because God sees the future, he closes doors that will take you off course. He shuts down what is too small for your destiny. He removes what will hinder your growth. Look at Moses. He believed his purpose was to deliver the Israelites, and in his own strength, he tried to do it by killing an Egyptian. He thought that was his door to leadership. But instead, God closed that door and sent him into the wilderness. For 40 years, Moses was in a season of preparation because the door he had chosen was too small for the assignment God had for him. If Moses had remained in Egypt on his own terms, he would have never walked in the fullness of his calling. What about Paul? He wanted to go to Asia to preach, but the Holy Spirit blocked him. That seems strange. Why would God stop someone from spreading the gospel? Because Paul's assignment was not where he thought it was. God had a greater mission for him. And if he had forced his way through that closed door, he would have been outside of divine timing. How many of us are frustrated right now because we are knocking on doors that God has already closed? How many of us are still trying to make something work that God has already moved on from? We say we trust God, but when he redirects us, we resist. We pray for his will, but when it doesn't look like what we expected, we complain. But let me tell you something. When God shuts a door, stop trying to reopen it. Too many of us are standing outside of locked doors, wasting time, instead of looking around to see the new door God has opened. We are so fixated on what we lost that we can't see what he is preparing. We hold on to relationships that God is removing. We cry over positions that he has already replaced, but listen, What God has for you will not require force. What He has ordained for you will not have to be manipulated. If it's His will, it will flow. A closed door is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of direction. The question is, will you trust Him enough to move forward? Will you believe that if He blocked it, He has something better? Or will you keep looking back, hoping for something He has already removed? God never takes something away without replacing it with something greater. But you will never see what's next if you are still crying over what's behind you. That job that didn't work out, that means there is a better one ahead. That relationship that ended, it means God has someone more aligned with your purpose. That opportunity that disappeared, it means something bigger is coming. What is in front of you is always greater than what is behind you. But you must be willing to trust God's direction. You must be willing to release what He has already closed. The next time a door shuts, don't panic, don't try to force it open. Instead, step back and say, Lord, I trust you. If you close this door, I believe you have something greater, because He always does. There comes a time in life when we must recognize that some doors are closed for a reason. But the problem is, many of us don't accept it. Instead of moving forward, we keep knocking, pushing, and trying to force open what God has already shut. We pray for direction, and when God gives it by closing a door, we ignore it and keep asking for another sign. But listen to me. When God shuts a door, stop knocking on it. We don't always understand why a door closes, and because of that, we struggle to let go. We think, maybe if I try again, it will work. Maybe if I put in more effort, the relationship will be saved. Maybe if I just wait a little longer, things will turn around. But what if God is saying, I already gave you the answer. I already made the decision. I already removed this for your good. The longer you stand at a closed door, the more you delay your destiny. The more time you spend looking back, the more you miss what God has ahead of you. Some of us are still knocking on the door of a past season, hoping it will open again. We are still praying for God to revive something He has already replaced. But let me ask you, if God shut the door, why are you still standing there? Think about the story of Samuel and Saul. God chose Saul to be king, but when Saul disobeyed, God rejected him. He had already prepared David as the next king, but what was Samuel doing? He was mourning over Saul. He was still focused on what was lost. And then God spoke, how long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him? In other words, why are you still holding on to what I have already moved on from? Many of us are like Samuel. We are mourning over something that is no longer God's plan for our lives. We are asking for a second chance with something God has already removed. But you cannot receive what's next while holding on to what's gone. You cannot step into your future while still begging for the past. Some doors are closed because what's behind them is too small for what God is calling you to. Some doors are shut because they no longer align with your purpose. Some relationships end because they were not meant to go with you into your next season. And when God closes a door, it's a sign that there is something ahead that is greater than what you're leaving behind. Look at the children of Israel. When God delivered them from Egypt, He shut the door behind them. He led them out of slavery, but many of them kept looking back. They kept talking about Egypt as if it was their future, when in reality was their past. They were free, but in their minds they were still bound. They didn't understand that when God closes a door, it's not just about moving you out of something, it's about moving you into something better. How many of us are free but still thinking like slaves to our past? How many of us have been delivered from something, but because we don't see the full picture yet, we keep longing for what was? Egypt was familiar, but it was not their destiny. That relationship was comfortable, but it was not your calling. That job was convenient, but it was not your kingdom assignment. You cannot step into the next level while holding on to a closed door. You cannot receive what God has for you while standing at the threshold of something that is already finished. And you must understand this. If the door was meant for you, it would not have closed. If the opportunity was God's best for you, it would not have disappeared. If the relationship was tied to your destiny, it would not have ended. Stop knocking on what God has already closed. Stop begging for what he has already removed. Stop praying for revival over something he has already replaced. The same God who shut the door has already prepared a new one. The same God who ended one season has already designed the next. But you will never see what's next if you keep looking back. So today, make a decision. Let go of what is closed. Stop knocking on doors that will never open again. Stop chasing what God has already rejected. Because when you finally surrender, when you finally stop knocking, you will realize that what God has ahead of you is far greater than what you left behind. One of the greatest struggles we face in life is learning to trust God's vision more than our own. God's vision more than our own. We make plans, set goals, and pursue dreams based on what we see, what we feel, and what we believe is best. But what happens when God interrupts those plans? What happens when the path we thought was right suddenly comes to an end? Too often, when God closes a door, we panic, we complain, we question. But the reason we struggle is because we are relying on our own sight instead of trusting the one who sees the whole picture. God sees what you don't. He knows the dangers ahead. He understands what is best for you even when you don't. But the problem is, we like to be in control. We like to plan our lives according to what makes sense to us. And when things don't go as expected, we assume something is wrong. But have you ever considered that maybe the reason things are not working out the way you plan is because God has something better in mind? Sometimes. The worst thing that could happen is for God to give us exactly what we want, because not everything that looks good is good for us. Not every opportunity that seems right is the right one. Not every relationship that feels comfortable is meant for our future. And if we are not careful, we will chase what looks good and miss what is good. That is why God, in his wisdom, sometimes steps in and says, no. That is why he blocks certain things, even when we don't understand. Look at the story of Balaam. He was determined to go in a certain direction, and no matter what, he wanted to move forward. But what did God do? He sent an angel to block the road. The donkey saw what Balaam couldn't see, and when it stopped, Balaam got angry. He started beating the donkey, trying to force it to move because he didn't realize that God was protecting him from disaster. And some of us are just like Balaam, trying to force our way into something that God is blocking. We keep trying to push forward when God is saying, stop. We keep trying to force relationships that God has already removed. We keep chasing after jobs, opportunities, and positions that are not aligned with our purpose. And when things don't work out, we get frustrated, not realizing that God is the one who blocked it. We cry over rejection when in reality it's protection. We mourn over lost opportunities, not knowing that God is preparing something greater. That's why the Bible says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Because your understanding is limited. Your vision is incomplete. You see today, but God sees eternity. You see the small picture, but he sees the full masterpiece. And if you truly believe that he is good, then you must trust that his ways are good, even when you don't understand them. Abraham had to trust God's vision. God told him to leave his country, his family, and everything familiar to go to a place he had never seen. And Abraham had a choice: trust his own understanding or trust God's vision. If he had leaned on his own understanding, he would have stayed where he was. But because he trusted God, he stepped into a destiny greater than he could have ever imagined. How many of us are holding back because we are afraid to trust what we cannot see? How many of us are still looking at the closed door instead of focusing on where God is leading us? You may not understand why he closed that door. You may not see why he ended that relationship. But if you truly believe that he is your shepherd, then you must trust that he is leading you in the right direction. The truth is, trusting God's vision is not always easy. It requires faith. It requires surrender. It requires you to let go of your limited perspective and say, God, I may not see the full picture, but I trust that you do. And when you do that, you will begin to experience peace, even in the midst of uncertainty. So the next time a door closes, don't panic. Don't fight against what God is trying to do. Instead, step back and say, Lord, I trust you. If you block this path, it's because you see something I don't. And I believe that what you have ahead of me is greater than what I left behind, because it always is. Life has a way of surprising us. We make plans, set goals, and map out our future, believing that everything will unfold just as we envisioned. But then, without warning, a door closes. The opportunity vanishes, the relationship ends, the business deal falls through, and in that moment, confusion sets in. Disappointment creeps into our hearts. We begin to ask God, why? Why would you allow this to happen? But what if I told you that when God blocks your path, he is not punishing you, he is protecting you? Sometimes the greatest blessing is not what God gives, but what he withholds. The doors he shuts are often the very ones that would have led to destruction. The opportunities he denies are often the ones that would have drained you. The relationships he removes are often the ones that would have distracted you from your destiny. But because we only see the present, we don't always recognize when something is a trap. We think it's a blessing, but in reality, it's a burden in disguise. Look at Adam and Eve. They were placed in a garden full of blessings. Everything they needed was there. God gave them dominion, authority, and freedom. But he also placed a restriction, a blocked path. He told them, you can eat from every tree except this one. But instead of trusting that God was protecting them, they saw it as limitation. They believed they were missing out on something good, when in reality, God was shielding them from something deadly. And this is what happens to many of us. We assume that if God is keeping us from something, it must be unfair. But what if he's actually keeping you from harm? Some of us are frustrated right now because God didn't give us what we prayed for. We are upset because the relationship didn't work out, the job didn't come through, or the business idea failed. But what if God saw what you couldn't see? What if he knew that what you wanted would have destroyed you? You thought that relationship was love, but God saw the heartbreak ahead. You thought that job was your dream, but God saw how it would drain your soul. You thought that opportunity was your big break, but God saw the compromise it would require. When God blocks your path, it is not because he is trying to hurt you. It is because he is trying to protect you. Sometimes protection looks like rejection. Sometimes love looks like loss. Sometimes the very thing you are crying over is the very thing God is rescuing you from. Look at the story of Jonah. God told him to go to Nineveh, but Jonah wanted to go in a different direction. He boarded a ship to Tarshish, thinking he could outrun God's plan. But what did God do? He sent a storm. He disrupted Jonah's journey not to punish him, but to redirect him. If Jonah had continued in the wrong direction, he would have missed his assignment. The storm was not there to destroy him. It was there to protect him from wasting his destiny. And the same is true for you. Some storms in your life are not attacks from the enemy. They are divine interventions. Some closed doors are not rejection, they are protection. Some disappointments are not failures. They are God's way of keeping you from what is not meant for you. That is why you must shift your perspective. Instead of asking, God, why did you take this away? Ask God, what are you protecting me from? Instead of mourning what didn't happen, start praising him for what didn't happen. Because if God didn't allow it, it means it wasn't part of his plan. And if it wasn't part of his plan, it means it was never for your good. The enemy wants you to believe that a blocked path is a sign that God has abandoned you. But listen to me, when God blocks a path, it is a sign that he is still in control. It means he is watching over you. It means he cares too much about your future to let you walk into something that would destroy you. And if you can learn to trust his no as much as you trust his yes, you will begin to experience a peace that surpasses all understanding. So today, shift your focus. Stop crying over the closed door. Stop begging for something that God has already removed. Stop trying to force your way into something that is not aligned with your purpose. Instead, step back and say, Lord, I trust you. If you block this, I believe it's for my good. If you close this door, I know it's because something better is ahead. Because when God blocks your path, he is not rejecting you. He is protecting you. There are moments in life when we find ourselves stuck at a crossroads, staring at a closed door, wondering why things didn't work out the way we planned. We cry, we plead, and we question God, asking, why did you let this happen? But what if I told you that every blocked path is not just about stopping you from something, but about preparing you for something greater? What if the delays, the detours, and the disappointments were never meant to harm you, but to shape you? One of the greatest lessons you must learn is that God doesn't just open doors. He prepares you for them. Because if you are not ready, even the right door can become a disaster. Many of us are praying for opportunities, for influence, for success. But God is saying, you're not ready yet. Not because he doesn't want to bless you, but because he loves you too much to give you something you are not equipped to handle. Think about David. He was anointed to be king as a young boy. The calling on his life was clear, but God didn't place him on the throne immediately. Instead, David went back to tending sheep. He went through years of hardship, running from Saul, hiding in caves, facing battles. Why? Because the process was preparing him for the position. If David had gone straight from the pasture to the palace, he would not have been ready. He needed to learn how to fight. He needed to learn how to lead. He needed to develop character, wisdom, and strength before stepping into his destiny. Some of us are frustrated because we see the promise, but we are still in the preparation. We know what God has called us to, but the door hasn't opened yet. And we assume that delay means denial. But listen to me, delay is not denial, it is development. God is developing you in the waiting. He is building your faith, strengthening your endurance, and refining your character. Because when the right door opens, he wants to make sure you can sustain what he gives you. Look at Joseph. He had a dream as a young man that he would be a ruler. But what happened? He was thrown into a pit. He was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused and thrown into prison. He is falsely accused and thrown into prison. For years, it looked like his life was moving in the opposite direction of his calling. But in reality, every challenge was preparing him for the palace. When the time came for Joseph to step into his destiny, he was not just a dreamer. He was a man of wisdom, integrity, and leadership. The process prepared him for the promise. And the same is true for you. You may not understand why things are taking so long. You may feel like you are stuck in a season of waiting, like the door will never open. But God is working behind the scenes. He is shaping you. He is pruning you. He is preparing you so that when the right time comes, you will not just walk through the door. You will be able to stay there. Think about an athlete training for the Olympics. They don't just wake up one day and run the race. They go through months, even years of intense preparation. They endure pain, discipline, and sacrifice. Because when the moment comes, they must be ready. And if they step onto the track without preparation, they will fail. God is doing the same in your life. He is training you for the moment that is coming. He is strengthening you for the doors he is about to open. The problem is many of us want the blessing without the preparation. We want the influence without the discipline. The then went, we want the success without the struggle. But let me tell you, without preparation, the very thing you prayed for can become the very thing that destroys you. That's why God is taking his time. That's why he is making sure you are ready before he gives you what you've been asking for. So instead of complaining about the delay, start embracing the process. Instead of questioning why the door hasn't opened yet, start asking, Lord, what are you teaching me in this season? Because every great person in the Bible went through a season of preparation before stepping into their destiny. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading Israel. Esther had to go through a season of preparation before becoming queen. Even Jesus, before starting his ministry, spent time in the wilderness. If God is making you wait, it is because what he has for you is worth the preparation. Don't despise the process. Don't rush what God is still building. Because when the time is right, when you have been fully prepared, the door will open and nothing will be able to stop what God has set in motion. There are moments in life when everything seems to be falling apart. You try to move forward, but every step feels like a struggle. You pray for an open door, but instead you encounter closed ones. You expect progress, but all you see is delay. And in those moments, it is easy to wonder, God, where are you? Why is this happening? But what if I told you that sometimes when God blocks your path, he is not just redirecting you, he is revealing something about yourself that you could not see before. God uses closed doors to show you who you really are. Because the truth is, we often do not know the strength, the resilience, or even the weaknesses inside of us until we are tested. When everything is going well, it is easy to think we have faith. It is easy to assume we trust God. But the real test comes when things do not go as planned. That is when we discover whether our faith is built on emotions or on a deep, unshakable trust in God. Look at the Israelites. When God led them out of Egypt, they were excited. They had seen miracles, plagues sent upon their enemies, the Red Sea parted before their eyes, manna falling from heaven. But the moment things became difficult, their true nature was revealed. When they faced obstacles, they complained. When they had to wait, they doubted. When they didn't understand, they wanted to go back to slavery. And God was using those moments to show them what was really in their hearts. He was revealing that while they had left Egypt physically, Egypt was still inside them spiritually. And that is exactly what God does in our lives. He allows us to go through seasons of struggle to show us what is really inside us. Some of us think we are ready for the next level, but when the door doesn't open, we get angry. We think we trust God, but when things don't go our way, we start to question him. We say we have faith, but the moment things take longer than expected, we start looking for shortcuts. The delay is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to reveal you. Sometimes God blocks your path to expose weaknesses that need to be addressed before you step into the next season. Maybe you struggle with pride and he needs to humble you. Maybe you rely too much on people's approval and he needs to teach you to depend on him alone. Maybe you have wounds from the past that need healing before you can handle what is coming next. If God allowed you to move forward without revealing these things, they could become the very things that destroy you later. Look at Peter. He was bold, passionate, and confident in his loyalty to Jesus. He declared, I will never deny you. But when pressure came, when the door of safety was closed, what happened? His true nature was revealed. He denied Jesus 3 times. But that moment was necessary because it exposed something in Peter that needed to be dealt with. And after that failure, after facing the truth about himself, Peter became a different man. He was humbled. He was refined. And when the time came for him to lead, he was no longer just passionate. He was truly prepared. God will do the same with you. He will block certain things, not because he is against you, but because he is trying to refine you. He is showing you the areas that still need growth, the mindsets that need to shift, the weaknesses that need to be strengthened. And if you respond correctly, if you allow him to do the work in you, you will come out stronger, wiser, and more equipped for what's ahead. So instead of complaining about the closed doors, ask yourself, Lord, what are you trying to show me? What are you revealing in me through this season? Because every delay, every blocked path, every unexpected challenge is an opportunity for growth. It is a chance for God to refine your character, to develop your faith, and to prepare you for what is coming next. Joseph had to face betrayal before he could handle authority. Moses had to face rejection before he could lead a nation. David had to endure years of hiding before he could wear the crown. And every struggle they faced was revealing something in them, something that had to be transformed before they could step into their destiny. And the same is true for you. God is not just focused on where he is taking you, he is focused on who you are becoming along the way. If you allow him to do the inner work, if you surrender to the process, if you trust that he knows exactly what he is doing, then when the right door finally opens, you will not just walk through it, you will walk through it as the person you were always meant to be. There comes a time in life when the path we planned, the road we were certain about, suddenly comes to a stop. We stand there, frustrated, confused, and wondering why things didn't work out. We pray, we push, we try everything in our power to make it happen, but no matter what we do, the door remains closed. And in those moments, it is easy to feel stuck. It is easy to feel abandoned. But what if I told you that when God blocks your path, it is not to keep you in one place. It is to move you forward in the direction of your true purpose. God never closes a door without opening another one. But the problem is, many of us spend so much time staring at the closed door that we miss the one he has already opened. We are so fixated on what didn't work, on the job we lost, the relationship that ended, the opportunity that slipped away, that we fail to see what God is trying to do next. When something is removed from your life, it is not a sign of loss. It is a sign of transition. It means God is shifting you. He is moving you from one season to another. But if you keep looking back, you will never see where he is trying to take you. Look at Elijah. After calling down fire from heaven and proving God's power before the prophets of Baal, he found himself in a wilderness, feeling alone, exhausted, and afraid. He had just experienced one of the greatest victories in his life, yet he felt stuck. But God did not allow him to remain in that place. Instead, he sent an angel to feed him and strengthen him because there was more ahead. Elijah thought the story was over, but God was saying, get up, your journey is not finished. Some of us are in that same place right now. We are mourning over what was, dwelling on what didn't work, allowing disappointment to hold us back. But God is saying, get up, I still have more for you. The blocked path is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new chapter. And if you stop moving, if you allow yourself to stay in the place of frustration, you will miss what God has already set in motion. Think about Paul. Before he became a great apostle, he had his own plans. He was on a mission, convinced that he was doing the right thing by persecuting Christians. But what did God do? He blocked his path. He stopped him on the road to Damascus, not to punish him, but to redirect him toward his true assignment. If Paul had continued on the path he originally chose, he would have never stepped into his purpose. But because he surrendered, because he allowed God to change his direction, he became one of the greatest voices in history. And that is what God wants to do in your life. When he blocks a path, it is because he sees something ahead that you cannot see. He knows where he is leading you, and he will not allow you to settle in a place that is beneath what he has planned for you. But you have to trust him enough to move forward. Some of us are afraid to let go. We are afraid to leave what is familiar, afraid to step into the unknown. But faith is not about understanding every step. It is about trusting the one who is leading you. Abraham didn't know where he was going when God told him to leave his homeland. He had no map, no clear direction, but he moved forward because he trusted that God knew the way. And because of his obedience, he walked into the promise. You have to be willing to do the same. When one door closes, don't waste time trying to force it back open. Don't waste energy crying over what God has already removed. Instead, ask him, Lord, where are you leading me next? Because I promise you, if you look up, you will see that there is already another door waiting for you. A new opportunity, a new path, a new season. God is not finished with you. The fact that you are still here, the fact that you are still breathing, means there is more ahead. And if he has blocked your path, it means he is redirecting you to something better. So don't resist the shift. Don't stay stuck in what was. Move forward in faith, knowing that God's plan is always greater than anything you could have imagined. My friends, every closed door, every blocked path, and every unexpected delay is not the end of your journey. It is a divine redirection. God never stops your progress to harm you. He does it to position you for something greater. He sees beyond what you can see. He knows what is ahead, and he will not allow you to walk into something that is not meant for you. So, when you face moments of frustration, when your plans don't work out, and when the path you thought was right comes to an end, don't let disappointment consume you. Instead, ask God, what are you trying to show me? Where are you leading me next? Because if you trust him, if you surrender to his timing, you will realize that what seemed like a setback was actually a setup for something far greater than you could have imagined. Let go of what is behind you. Stop fighting for what God has already closed. Open your heart, open your mind, and step forward with faith, because the God who blocked the wrong path is the same God who is leading you to the right one. Your future is not behind you, it is ahead of you. May you walk with courage, may you trust the process, and may you always remember that when God is in control, nothing is ever truly lost, only repositioned for something better. Good luck on your journey, and thank you.